I'm delighted to be discussing economics, international relations, and many other subjects which are interrelated to these two bodies of knowledge with Avantika Kolaru, a person I've known, a colleague as well at Edbrand, who guided so many students in her 2+ years working with bright minds that we are privileged to be sort of guiding. So, Avantika, welcome. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself and we'll move from there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that introduction. I'm Avantika. I study economics and international relations at Ashoka University. Since then, I've been doing some work in education. So, of course, I've worked with Arjun at Edbrand, and following that, I worked at an edtech startup. Yeah.
Okay, so economics is such a question. Many students and parents also ask, like, oh, so my son or daughter would want to become an investment banker. So economics should be it. Should they also have a strong leaning towards, say, quantitative subjects? What else should they really look at? Or my son or daughter is not sure about, say, studying business or economics in general. How would you define economics as a subject for a student who's thinking of taking that up as a major in college?
Yeah, sure. I think economics is essentially the study of um, you're learning about systems and society, especially through the view of goods, services, and how money moves. That's a fairly broad definition, but that is in fact. I think it doesn't include a lot of different things that you'll end up studying when you're studying economics. So you will study something like how a company will make profits or losses, the kind of reasons and maybe the math behind that. But you'll also study something like how countries are able to thrive and how they're able to maintain relations with other nations, um, and maybe the inventions of currency, etc., etc. So you do study things across a varying scale, small and large, and there's of course a host of different things that kind of fall between that. Yeah.
So when a student says, "Oh, I'm so interested. I've read one book on say behavioral economics, and I'm fascinated, and I want to go sort of choose that as a major while they're in high school,"
Yeah.
how would you ask them to slow down and say, "Okay, just figure out what are the basic building blocks for economics as a study, and what
Yeah.
are the additional toolkits they need to have? Could be data science or dealing with a lot of math.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to scope it out."
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think, the kind of work that we used to do at Edbrand with students who used to come and say that a lot. But yeah, I think I would maybe kind of recommend starting the bare basics. So, I mean, if you would say something like a behavioral economics, that would be essentially the intersection of psychology and economics, and how those two influence each other, or how behavior essentially influences rational decision making. So, I think a student kind of understanding the basics of both the subjects would help. And in terms of the requirements or kind of inclinations that you do need to have, yes, economics is fairly analytical. It does, I think, require a lot of, or some segments of it does require data work. So kind of learning to be comfortable with numbers. You don't have to be the best at it, but you just have to be open to kind of, playing with that skill a little bit when it's required, and developing it to go into specific subfields of economics. Yeah.
Okay, so and what about other things? Suppose students say, "Oh, I want to be this finance hotshot." What would that path look like in your mind?
Yeah. Well, of course, I don't think it's necessary to study economics. To do that, I'm sure you could study business or finance as well. Yes, economics might give you a certain perspective or a certain view of the world that maybe finance would give you a certain narrow perspective, or business is again looking at certain functions, or kind of again a different perspective there. So I mean, I think it would maybe be up to like a personal preference, but yes, when something that I personally felt is that when you study economics, you are going through a very rigorous degree. So just the process of actually making it through that and putting in the hard work to understand all of these different components, that does definitely build a muscle that would be useful, if you want to become an investment banker, or you want to kind of go into finance more hardcore, etc. So I think it would be related. Yeah.
So economics makes students sort of career ready in some sense, because they can sort of immediately look at jobs across industries.
Yeah.
However, if someone wants to pursue further education or get a terminal degree, also say even a PhD eventually, there's enough room for that.
Yeah.
In your mind, how did you make those choices, decisions? And I know it's you're still kind of evolving with that thought, or friends around you who sort of
Mhm.
had those choices to study further. What are the different options to
Yeah.
pursue?
So I think, like you said, there are different things that you can kind of do, and you can work across industries. So just thinking of the things that I've done as well as friends I have who studied economics and what they're doing. You can of course work in private industries or private sectors. You can work at companies. You could work in big corporates. You could work at a startup, because essentially you're thinking more in terms of the skills that you can apply to derive or create value rather. You can also work with governments, you can work with nonprofits. So public policy is a fairly popular next step after you study economics, just because I think the subject gives you such a comprehensive view of government, society, and countries as well. So working to design policies and maybe even the impact space when you're thinking of something like a development economics, or you're looking at maybe health economics, etc. So how to actually support and create those systems to improve health or education, learning outcomes, etc. So those are some of like the broad areas. And of course, like I said earlier as well, I think that you do develop certain skills that are industry agnostic. So whether that's working with data, whether that's writing research papers, things like that, that you could, if you would like to switch and you want to do something completely different as well, it would still be useful. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that sums it up pretty well. Look forward to having more conversations around this and
Yeah.
inviting you to future panels with some of our students.
Sure.
So long.
Thank you. Yeah.